Today, we are diving into the college admissions scandal, also known as Operation Varsity Blues, to learn how wealthy parents, celebrities, and college coaches got caught in a massive racketeering scheme to cheat the admission system and what it reveals about the financial privilege and true cost of higher education in America. You're listening to Real Stories, Real Problems with Rachael and Roxanne.
Rachel, how are you today?
I am good. How are you, Roxanne?
Oh my God, I'm excited about this episode. I think this is going to be my favorite episode of this podcast ever. So yeah, take us there. What was going on at the time?
So, this was filmed in 2020. And instead of just being like, hey, that was the pandemic, I've got a couple of actual things that happened in 2020 that were not the pandemic.
Oh my God, there were things happening that was not the pandemic.
I know, right? In January, a third state of emergency was called in Australia because the bushfires continued to devastate parts of the country. And at the 2020 Golden Globe Awards, Awkwafina made history as the first person of Asian descent to win in the lead actress category. That was also the year that Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna and 7 other passengers died in a tragic helicopter accident.
Yeah, that was awful.
And then Harvey Weinstein was sentenced to 23 years in prison for being a sexual predator.
Oh man, you gotta love that.
Yeah,
Wow.
so outside of the pandemic, that's some of what was going on in 2020. But
Wow.
yeah, so this documentary is Operation Varsity Blues, and it's about the college admissions scandal that happened in like 2018, 2019 was when this really started making big news.
Yeah.
And my only memory of this was Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman got caught up in this, and I remember them being on the news a lot and their kids being referenced. But I didn't really know a ton of details about it until I watched this documentary. Oh my God.
Well, see, I being like 13 years older than you or so, I remember it very clearly because I had been at my university or that university for about 5 years at that point, and everyone came unglued. Now, I'm not going to mention which university it is, but it's hardly a prestigious university. It's not a community college, it is a 4 year college, but nobody is going to try to cheat to get into this particular university. But we had to have damage control meetings, and there were like floods of emails from the dean and the president of the college and this, that, the other thing, and all of the coaches. We are not known for our athletics. We don't even have a football team. But we do have crew, which I think is kind of weird. Um, so the coaches got involved. Parents started getting very paranoid and calling and asking these questions. And because of FERPA laws, they weren't allowed to answer. Oh my God, the lawyers came in. And I was just standing there watching this going, is this actually happening in the professoriate, in the world of higher academics, where I, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to educate myself to a PhD level, and these people are buying their way in.
And I think the thing that was shocking for me as the documentary went along was just how many people were involved in this. And I got the like feeling that they understood they were doing something wrong, but not that they were doing anything illegal. Like
Right.
they
They just
didn't
knew it was morally wrong.
yeah, they knew that it was morally wrong, but that they didn't think they were like breaking any major laws or anything. They had no concept of the fact that they were racketeering. That is what they were
Right.
doing.
Didn't they read the RICO standard? I mean, it's it's baffling to me. And what this documentary reminded me of a little bit was, I think, on our second episode, Born rich?
Yes.
Is yeah,
Rich,
that was
yeah.
that were these privileged kids of that age, of college age, had no idea how the world worked and what was going on behind the scenes of their luxury yachts and their fancy cars and their fancy colleges.
Yeah, I thought about the Born Rich documentary more
Yep.
than once watching it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But like racketeering is it is an important law. It like addresses real things, but the RICO standards and such, they are also used to take down crime where their crime may not exist. So, like for instance, if you file a fraudulent insurance claim, and by fraudulent I mean you lied about where you parked your car at night to get lower car insurance rates, and you filed a claim and it went on and nothing happened, you got your claim, and then within the next 10 years something else happens and you file a fraudulent claim, and by which I mean the car already was damaged partially but you didn't tell them that, that
Okay.
constitutes RICO statutes. That constitutes a financial racketeering. You can go to jail for that.
I did not know that. I
And
know that when I collect my unemployment, I have to click the little box that says, I know that if I'm lying, I'm committing fraud and possible jail time and all this. But you don't think about lying about and cheating to get into college on the same level as defrauding the government.
yeah, and like small things, tiny things can run afoul of the RICO statutes
Hmm.
in in the United States. So I can see where these parents would look at this kind of the same way that somebody in our economic, bandwidth would look at lying about, well, somebody broke into my house. Well, they stole more than they actually did. I'm going to pad that insurance thing and get an extra $500 or whatever,
Right.
which I, as a licensed insurance agent, I would not do. Like, I'm not recommending this. Don't do that because
Don't
it,
do this. No ideas here.
but I think they thought about it kind of the same way that a lot of people would think about insurance fraud, in that really who's getting hurt by this, and so a lot of these people made huge bribes, like understanding that these were bribes but also not
Hmm.
quite understanding that they were making donations to an organization was the cover for it. And I don't know how much they actually knew, even the people.
They I was getting the impression that they knew something nefarious was going on because the way that Mark Singer himself explained, you can get into college through the front door, which is being accepted on the actual merits of your high school academia. You could get in through the back door where you donated to the university itself millions of dollars to build, toward a building or an athletic field or something. And then he came up with what he called the side door,
Which was
where
fraud.
he would, yes, which is fraud. But I don't think the parents really understood that either, because very wealthy people often don't understand how money works. They have guys for that. They've got their lawyers, they've got investment brokers, they have stockbrokers. Very few very wealthy people really know from day to day how liquid they are or where all their money really is. So for them to hear Mark Singer say, yeah, for $50,000, I'll have this other person take the test for your kid. eh, I don't think they really knew that it was, like you said, that it was illegal. They knew it was criminal, but they didn't know it was illegal. They're very different things.
Yeah, and I mean, how many times have you had a job or gone in to do something, you had an appointment somewhere, and you went in and you were like, well, this is how I'm supposed to do it. And they're like, that's technically on paper what you're supposed to do, but that's not how we do things. Like,
Yes.
so this seems like a very like ramped up version of that, where you
Yeah.
go in and they're like, technically, this is the way, but it doesn't actually work that way. Um, so
Yeah. I mean, at my store, I had to go through onboarding where I was shown a lot of videos where I took copious notes. And then, my bosses, God love them, they were like, don't worry about that. That's not how it really works. You know,
Yeah. So like I kind of got the feeling that Rick Singer was very much like taking advantage of that thing that we all deal with in society about how rules versus actuality. And he kept telling them, these are things that are put in place. And there's nothing wrong with it. But like they at one point they addressed abusing the systems that were put in place for disabled people who need extra
yes.
accommodations, and that faking a disability so that they could have the extra time for the ACTs or the SATs so that they could get a higher score. Every
Hmm.
one of them was like, all right, sure. What do I pay? Who do I go to get my kid diagnosed, quote unquote,
Right,
so that
right.
they can get that extra time? Because to them, it was not wrong. They were just giving their kid every advantage.
It was the medical marijuana of the academic world. And I
Yeah.
realize I've been calling Rick Singer Mark Singer, who's an actor and has nothing to do with Mark Singer. I love you. If you're out there, dude, I loved V. I'm not accusing you of racketeering at all there. I feel
No,
very
different dude.
huge fan. I mean, different guy.
But I was laughing within 3 or 4 minutes of this documentary because they open and it's the students getting their college acceptance and they're like showing this, and then they're showing the news footage of the breaking college admission scandal stuff. But then they immediately drop into how Rick Singer was manipulating this. And the first thing they show is him using Photoshop to cut a student's head off of his photo and Photoshop him onto like an Olympic water polo player so that he could fake his way into the water polo team.
I mean, there's a lot of things I could fake, but water polo skill is not one of them. But yeah, I mean, that's literally what he was doing. He was using Photoshop to make these dummy pictures, putting the students' heads onto professional athletes, and he asked the parents for a signature sample of their child and handwriting samples so he could forge documents, which is a federal crime. And so, yeah, I
And
was sitting there going, accountabilities.
he was doing this all across state lines. He was flying around the country to do this. So then that became like for interstate issues, like he
Right?
he had no concept of protecting himself in any kind of legal way. Um,
Oh, no.
but I thought it was crazy. This is the first documentary that we've done that recreated wiretap conversations so that
Yes, and I loved it.
yeah, they didn't play the original wiretap conversations, but they took the transcripts from the court and had actors redo them. And I thought that was a really cool way to kind of bring us into what was going on.
Oh, absolutely. And I loved the scenes where the woman agent was typing out everything that she was hearing Rick Singer say and all the phone calls. And one of the fathers was actually smart enough to say to Mark Singer, I did it again. To Rick Singer, poor Mark Singer, to Rick Singer, um, is this something we should be talking about over the phone? And Dopey Rick says, sure, there's nothing going.
He's like, I've been doing this for 20 years. Nobody's caught me
Right,
yet.
right.
Yeah,
Nobody's
well,
caught me yet. Yeah, now that was like when oh God, what was his name? Stephen Rubell, I think his name was, who owned Studio 54, went on the Dick Cavett show and said he didn't pay taxes, apparently not knowing that the IRS agents also watched the Dick Cavett show. And the next day, bam, prison. So,
well, and what I think I was most taken by this whole documentary was that this was a middle school student's idea of fraud. I'm going to use Photoshop and fake this picture. Like one of the things he did was he would fake affirmative action. He would lie about race or gender or
oh
things
my
on
God.
affirmative action forms just so that they would tick off the boxes to be more acceptable. people are
Yeah.
going to notice this white dude showing up saying that he was
Yes.
Hispanic. Like, that's not.
Right. It's like, didn't you check that you were African American? You look really Nordic to me. I don't think that you're actually of African American descent. Yeah, certainly.
So that
Taking
just it all felt like a 12-year-old boy was like figuring shit out, and he was like, "Oh, what if I just check the wrong affirmative action box? What'll happen? Oh, what if I just fake this photo?" Like, it was just the funny. Obviously, it's not funny because it really stopped a lot of kids from getting into schools that they should have gotten into, and it caused a lot of pain for a lot of people and cost, racketeering and all that jazz. But the process of it was very funny.
And well, see, as I have a good friend who is a former police officer. We will not mention names. And he once told me that many times when he was interrogating somebody at the police station, he wanted more than anything to just turn off his tape recorder and go, "All right, just between you and me, what the hell were you thinking?" Just this is not the record, but what the hell was going through your head when you decided to do this dumbass thing?
Yeah, like that I kind of had that moment the whole time I was watching this, like, what in the world made you think he would get away with this? And in fairness, he did get away with it for like 30 years.
Right.
But
Yeah.
this,
And I think a lot of his problem near the end was he got careless because of hubris.
yeah,
He,
and he
you
also, like,
agree?
typically if you are going to commit some type of larger crime, what I have learned from mafia movies is that you want to keep your circle of people committing crimes with you small. Like, you don't want this.
Yes, that's true.
And this is, assuming that mafia movies are accurate in this way, but that's kind of what I picked up on, that you don't want a ton of people with their hands in this because it just takes one weak link to destroy everything you've got. And
Well, the
that's
next time I
exactly.
talk to Ray Liotta, I'll see. But no, Benjamin Franklin also said the only way that three men can keep a secret is if two of them are dead. Yes, the only way that three men can keep a secret is if two of them are dead.
Yeah, so he was branching out and bringing in more and more people from various schools, like, and they brought on somebody that he paid to take tests for kids, and he brought on people to, like, he created an entire business out of this illegal
Mm,
activity, and he even named it. It was called the Key. It was a college admissions, like, counseling service is what he
right. He
called
was
it.
the coach, the college admissions coach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I was so surprised that he was that brazen. But he I got the impression that from everybody that they talked to in this documentary that he was kind of a smooth operator, and you never could have a conversation with him and know if he was actually being honest with you about anything.
Right. I mean, they said, he's a natural salesman, natural born salesman. He knew all the vernacular, he knew the ins and the outs, and he knew just what to say to a parent that may be a little, isn't this kind of like dishonest and illegal? He would just immediately smooth over that, you
Yeah.
know.
And they talked about how he would dig into your insecurities and use that to kind of like force you to work
Hmm.
with him if you were really wealthy. And one of the comments that was made by somebody, I don't remember who said it, but parents are applying to college and their kid is the vehicle through which they are applying to college.
The kids
So
are the conduit to that. Yeah,
yeah,
that
so
I
this was
remember that
about
too.
the prestige for these parents of having a child at Harvard. It was not
Right.
about their kid needing a Harvard education. And
Exactly.
that he would kind of twist that dial and make you afraid that if your kid didn't go there, bad things were going to happen, or that your kid couldn't get into a regular school on their own. They said that when he got Felicity Huffman dragged into this, her and William H.
Mhm.
Macy, that he lied to her. Her kids' scores were good enough to get into any Ivy League school. And he said, no,
Right.
her scores are not good. You have
Yeah.
to do it my way, or she's going to end up at a community
Right.
college or a state university.
Right. Because the father was saying, well, what, you mean her scores aren't good enough? And, Rick Singer was like, no, well, what's her chances if we don't do it your way? Zero chance, and so what, it's ridiculous that college is so competitive now. And with Trump, who wants to get rid of the traditional university, thus putting me out of a job forever, it's not valued as much anymore. It seems like the higher education isn't valued, the knowledge isn't valued, but the piece of paper is.
Well, what I'm noticing with Trump and the right is that it's not that they don't value education. They don't want poor people to value education because they are
Oh,
still sending their kids to universities and paying out the ass to put their kids in where
mm-hmm.
the most expensive places that they can go because they know that education is a vital part of having a functional adulthood and future, but they don't want you to have that.
Right. Yeah.
So,
In my 30 years of being a college professor, I have known some of the stupidest kids you could ever hope to meet. Bless their little hearts. And 9 times out of 10, their last name was on a building on the campus, or it was legacy, which Rick Singer lied about and said, oh, legacy doesn't mean anything. Yeah, it does. It totally does.
yeah. And even like they highlighted that Jared Kushner bought his way into Harvard. Like they called him right out. As you
Mm-hmm.
were incompetent, you had to buy your way into an Ivy League university. They did not want you.
Right, right. And Jared Kushner's father got arrested, believe it or not, in my hometown in a sex scandal. But that's another story for another time.
And his big selling point was that this was getting your kid into an Ivy League school at what he called a bargain basement price, which was somewhere
Mm-hmm.
between $160,000 and $500,000. If
I want to know what
500,000,
basement.
yeah, that's a huge basement. Like he can fuck right
Yeah,
off with that.
yeah. We're talking pool table and arcade games in that basement.
Yeah. And they talked about how he really manipulated people because at one point they started talking to the sailing coach at Stanford whose name is John Vandermoor,
Vandermoor, yeah.
and he was kind of caught up in this in a way that he didn't understand what was going on. And
Mm-hmm.
Rick Singer had a girl, Molly Zhao, who wanted to go to Stanford, and he was faking this, portfolio to be able to send her to Stanford as part of the sailing
Mm-hmm.
team. And they said, no, we don't want that information. And Molly Zhao got into the Stanford of her own accord. Rick
Right.
Singer did not. They ended up not working with him, and she got in anyway. So then Rick Singer went in and made a big donation
Mm-hmm.
to Stanford sailing team to like kind of create a relationship so that you have to do what he wants in the future because he's a huge donor to the school.
Mm-hmm.
And John Vandermoor was the only one who was found not guilty as part of this whole thing. Like in the end, they took down everybody. But
Mm-hmm.
because every dime that came into him was given to the school, he thought he was fundraising.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
because he didn't take any of that money as personally for himself, they were
Hmm.
able to argue successfully in court that he was not part of this
Part of the
racketeering thing.
conspiracy, right? Exactly. And of course, charitable donations are tax deductible, which was another thing Rick Singer was saying, and also you get this benefit.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And then
Unbelievable.
they got into some of the fake shit he set up. I never laughed so hard. He had a 5'5" men's basketball player, a cheerleader who was supposed to be a lacrosse player, a water polo player who had never been in water polo at any point. Like clearly these were fake. There's no
Right.
way that somebody who's slightly taller than me gets into, the men's basketball team at Stanford.
Right. And is
Happening.
in March Madness.
Yeah,
Exactly.
But like the athletic director of USC was getting $20,000 a month from him, is what they
Mm-hmm.
said. That
Yep.
like more than some people earn in a year. She was pulling in bribes per month to put kids in school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
And
I looked it up, and in every single state, with the exception of Hawaii, why I'm not sure, the person at a college who is paid the highest salary is the football coach, not the president of the university, not the ombudsman, not the deans, nobody in academics. It's the sports, it's the athletics. And that's where all the money goes.
yeah, which is awful because I don't
Yeah,
send my kid to college because I feel like they should be really good at football. I'm sending them there for
right.
an education. The fact that
Mm-hmm.
they're putting all this money into football so that kids want to go there is ridiculous. Um,
Yeah, not to mention, what if the kid breaks his leg during the first semester? You know, he's done with football. He's then going to have to go by his academics, which clearly are not his stronger suit, you know.
yeah. Um, but but at one point they started talking to a woman he met on a dating site,
Oh
and
my God.
uh, she was so
Yeah.
fun. She talked about going out on dates with him and kind of this relationship that they started to build, and how eventually, they started talking. And one of the things that they had in common was that they were both working when they were 12. She had a paper route, and he would get older boys to buy liquor for him, and he would sell it to the young boys in middle school at a markup.
Yeah. And
Like,
so she's like, okay, who admits to that on a first date? I mean,
what kind of shady shit? He's been doing this since he was a
he
kid?
was 12. Well, the man knows the value of a dollar, I guess. I mean, it's just, but the thing that made me the most angry, and it was, I was laughing and screaming alternatively through this whole thing, is that these people are taking seats away from students who deserve them, who
Yeah.
are smart enough on their own merits to get in, not because they're a minority, not because they have a learning disability or that they play sports really well. There are so many students who are deserving of an Ivy League education, and they either can't afford it, can't afford the tuition, or there's a guy like Rick Singer lurking in the background, dragging kids who don't deserve it and don't plan to actually go to class. You know, like I said, it's not the learning itself, it's not the knowledge that's valuable, it's the diploma that you put on your wall. That's, I went to Harvard. There it is.
Yeah. And then as we were watching this, the thing that I think I had to pause and be like, oh my God, is that one of his selling points of his system that gets your kid into school is that your kid doesn't know. Your kid thinks that they did really well on the SAT or the ACT. They have no idea that he paid somebody 15 grand
Mhm.
to change those grades. Your kid
Right,
thinks that they get in on their own merit, but that's nowhere near true. And then I
right.
started thinking about Brett Kavanaugh and Brock Turner and all of
Oh,
these people who very clearly I'm not going to say that they, you know, racketeered their way into school, but clearly
mhm.
money was thrown around and these
Yeah,
people got where they wanted. And then when they started doing horrible things because they thought they were fantastic and untouchable because they were
right.
wealthy and they got in on their own merit because that makes them better than everybody else. Like how much of that attitude comes from the fact that basically somebody is bulldozing all of the things in front of you and making it so easy for you to move forward in your life. Like
Hmm.
they have no
Yeah.
obstacles and they don't even know that somebody has gone in
See,
front of them.
that occurred to me too. I thought to myself, what's going to happen? Okay, this what she thinks she got into Yale on her own merit. She's all excited. She has no idea that Rick Singer manipulated the scores and whatnot. What is going to happen to her first actual semester at Yale? She's going to realize she is way out of her league, that she just doesn't belong there on an academic level. I mean, I have been the stupidest person in a room many times, and it is not a good feeling. She's gonna flunk. She's gonna fail out, and then she's gonna. So what is it? Then what's gonna happen with her family? That oh, my daughter got into Yale. Well, now your daughter is flunked out of Yale because she didn't really get into Yale. It was this other guy over there.
Yeah, like I cannot imagine if I found out one day that all the things that I thought I had accomplished somebody had done for me.
Oh my God, I know. That
How,
would be wanting to slap my dad in his undead face again.
yeah, like how mad would I be at the people who did that? How mad would I be at myself for not seeing that stuff was going on for me, that things were being done
Right.
for me? How frustrated would that be? My life, I'd be in therapy for years.
Yeah, certainly. Absolutely. If I found out that I didn't like get where I was on my own merit, but because my parents had greased the wheels, I'd then start to wonder what else aren't they telling me about things that happened to me? Am I adopted? Are you even my mom and dad? I, I would start to question every single thing. Like, did I get the lead in the school play because I'm a good actress, or was money exchanged? Did I get the creative writing award 4 years in a row because money was exchanged? I'd question every single thing that I'd ever accomplished.
Yes. And then they talked about Lori Loughlin's kids, Olivia Jade, and I forget the younger one's name. Um, and how they basically came a hair's breadth away from bringing down the whole operation
Mhm.
because Olivia Jade, the oldest Laughlin Massimo kid, um, didn't want to go to school. She didn't even want to finish high school. She was fighting with her mom about not finishing her senior year. She was a
Mhm.
successful influencer. She had sponsorships from Sephora and other places. Like she already had a successful career before she was graduating from high school. And so she really didn't want all of this that they wanted for her. And they forced her. They're like, this is not a choice. You are going to school. You are going to USC because that's the most prestigious school like that we can manage to get you into.
Mhm.
And so they took pictures of her on a rowing machine and they faked her as a coxswain, which was a new word I learned from this documentary.
You didn't know about that? Oh, no, no, no. My dad is from Philadelphia. Well, was is still whatever from Philadelphia, and sculling rowing is very popular in that area. So I knew what a coxswain was,
Yeah,
but
but like
but
essentially
it's a
that
wonderful word, isn't it?
the head of a rowing team. And
Yes.
so they're going through all of this, and she's making all these videos about how she hates school and she doesn't want to go to school. And they have to pull her aside and be like, you really can't keep saying this. This is going to come back
Right.
on you. And then they send all of this information to the school, and school reaches out to her high school guidance counselor, and he's like, she's not an athlete. And so they're like, okay. And then her dad goes storming into the high school counselor's office to yell at him for maybe screwing this up. And then they have to have meetings between like all of the USC staff about we need to be careful. We can't have parents going in and assaulting people and yelling at
Yeah,
people.
yeah, yeah. That's going to really tarnish our name and our good standing. Oh my God, it was just so bizarre. And the fact that there were 53 separate defendants. I mean, that had to have been one of the most expensive trials ever. I mean,
Well,
just,
and even going through the list of defendants,
I
some of it
know.
was nuts. The Michelle Janobs,
Mhm.
the Hot Pocket lady. She's the heiress to the Hot Pocket, or
Yeah.
her husband invented Hot Pockets or something. And so, like, getting to see wealth from anywhere. It didn't matter what kind of celebrity or wealthy person you were. If you had access to wealth, it was going to put you there. Um,
Mm,
but at least 53 people were charged as part of the conspiracy, most of whom pled guilty. And
mhm.
33 parents of college applicants were accused of paying more than $25 million between 2011 and 2018 to Rick Singer, who used that money to fraudulently inflate, exam test scores and stuff. And of the 32 parents named by the FBI, more than half had paid bribes to have their children enrolled in USC specifically.
Hmm.
And this was the
Yeah.
largest case of its kind to ever be prosecuted by the US Department of Justice. So,
Hmm.
so yeah, this was the largest scandal. Like, this was huge. The number of people that were involved in this and the amount of money that was being thrown around in this scandal.
Well, there was also the woman that had the two daughters, and she was like, "What if they talk to each other?" Because she had chosen the Rick Singer method of admission for her older daughter, but she said that her younger daughter was actually, and she even used these words, "She's not stupid like my older daughter. She's going to wonder how come my older sister, who's, well, kind of dumb, got into this excellent university, but me, who's been getting high grades my whole life, how come I didn't?" And she was terrified that they would talk, and that the older daughter would somehow find out that she was fraudulently attending a prestigious university.
Yeah, and I can't imagine that woman is going to have much of a relationship with her older daughter because that phone call was recorded and played in court.
Mhm. I played in
What kind
court,
of
sure.
listening to your mom tell the FBI over wiretap that you're stupid?
Right.
Oh my God.
I just what I'd be interested in knowing, and I didn't think the documentary addressed this part, was were the students then, did they have their degrees revoked because they got in fraudulently?
I don't know. That's
Because
a
they didn't
good
cheat
question.
once they were in college. But I was wondering that those who got through it, did they get any sort of penalty or something?
That's a good question. I will look that
Huh,
up here in a minute. Um,
okay.
but and then as the documentary was going on, Rick Singer got progressively more and more wealthy. Like he moved
Hmm.
into a larger house and he started driving a Tesla. And my note says, "Of course, this douche drives a Tesla."
Yes.
And so like he's going through this whole process, and you can see the wealth building and that he is
Mhm.
just holding on to this. He's got like this, oh, I don't even know the words for it, but it's like this approach of confidence that I have never seen, that of course my method works, and of course you have to pay me, and of course
Mhm.
nothing bad will ever happen to you, and like he is using this confidence and this grift to enrich himself in a way that I don't think I've ever seen anybody else do, or at least known that that's what I
He
was
started
watching.
to believe his own press. He
Yeah,
became his own invention.
it was it's like you watched him go from, hey, this is a thing that'll make me a little bit of money, to I am the only one who can get these kids into
Right.
college. Like we watched him kind of take that mental journey.
Mhm. Yeah,
um
yeah, exactly. You know, and
and
the parents were like, "Well, I've already given this guy $50,000 and now he wants another $20,000 to do this little bit more. I'm already in it. I might as well, go big or go home," I always say.
okay, this has been so great, but I'm actually going to pause you there because we have so much to say about this. I think this needs to be a two-part episode. So join us again next week for the thrilling conclusion to our Operation Varsity Blues podcast.